Hey Phil, so I wanted to give you a couple of my own personal thoughts on what you had to say in your last video, and I think the problem or the situation, maybe it's not even a problem really, the situation is that more and more people are becoming cognizant of, intellectually and experientially aware of spirituality and the spiritual path, or the path towards self-realization, whatever you want to call it, self-actualization, um, enlightenment, satori, moksha, etc. And there's so much information out there, so many different varieties of practice and varieties of theory. I mean, if you're into integral theory, for example, it is an intellectual exercise, and there is a certain amount of reading that you must do in order to reach um, a level of cognitive development which is capable of understanding at least a particular perspective of the integral realization, and there's another point, another facet to it, which is that language is, of its very essence, inadequate as a means of expressing what the core of the spiritual experience is. So we could read as many books as we want, and we're never necessarily going to have that moment of awakening. Now, I think a Zen master will employ the koan as an attempt to confound the intellectual or verbal rational mind of the seeker, and sometimes this is effective, but I'm wondering if Zen, as an Eastern tradition, as a tradition which began, well, you could say with Buddha in India, or Bodhidharma, who brought it from India to China. Um, it's an Asian tradition, and we kind of inherited it here in the West. And of all of the um, foreign or exotic religions, at least for us here in the West, Zen is probably the best adapted to be somehow applicable to our situation. And we do live on a single planet now, and it's not as though we can easily separate different races of human beings at this point. But I think there is a degree to which we are Westerners, and the people in Asia are Easterners, and there's somehow a difference in our cultural inheritance, which um, situates us in very different worlds. And I guess the point I'm making is that when we as Westerners look to the East for wisdom, it is difficult to find it. But Zen is poised to be the most useful to us because it is, Alan Watts says that Buddhism is Hinduism stripped for export. In other words, it's the bare essentials that you need to really get the core of the Hindu teaching. And I think Zen is then Buddhism stripped for export, and so it's a further refining of a process of refining which has already occurred from Hinduism to Buddhism. And so the core principle of Zen is unspeakable, right? It's Tao. It is an experiential realization that can never be codified, can never be grasped, whether you're grasping after an emotion or a particular phrase which you write down in a book. The experience of Satori is none of these things. And if the path, the spiritual path, is constituted by a seeking after this experience, well, from the perspective of the Zen master and the koan, we're in a double bind, right? There's no way to really escape trying not to try. If not trying is the experience that we seek, there's really no way to attain it, and that is a catch-22, a paradox. Um, and I've been thinking a lot about this word ego, because it's so easy to hate on the ego, and I think when you get down to what Buddha really wanted to express about ego, it wasn't that it doesn't exist or that it does exist, but that it's not what we think it is. And instead of blaming it for our selfishness or spiritual pride or blaming it for hindering our path towards enlightenment, I think we need to integrate it and recognize it as part of what it means to be a whole human being. A whole human being is not rid of their ego, because what wants to get rid of the ego? Just another ego, and this seems to be what the ego does. It constantly steps outside of itself and tries to change the situation. And to even recognize that the ego does this is an attempt to change the situation. Um, and so that isn't really going to get us anywhere. So rather than blame the ego and focus on how to get rid of or to tie down the ego, I think we need to find a way to allow it to be whatever it already is without destroying us at the same time, destroying our whole being at the same time. And, that's an ongoing project. I'm not going to try to work out that problem now. I'm just trying to open the playing field a little bit more for the ego, to give it some room to really be seen and not to just be dismissed and repressed. Because when we repress something, it becomes unconscious and it is almost doubly as powerful at that point. So we really need to bring it out into the light and fully examine what it is that we're trying to get rid of. Because, when you try to get rid of it, it doesn't even exist. But then when you say it doesn't exist, you're also just trying to get rid of something, because why would you even say that about something which didn't exist? Just why not remain, quiet about it? So there is nothing you can do. And, that is a dangerous thing to say. And you're right that a lot of spiritual teachers seem to be a little bit hesitant about saying it without qualification. But they say it anyways, don't they? They say it knowing they will be misunderstood by most and maybe understood by a few, and it is the few who do understand and who can put the book down and what? Because, at least for myself, and I think for you too, Phil, scholarship is in our future. So I will continue to have a relationship with books, and I think there's no reason to assume that reading itself isn't experiential and doesn't open doors along the path. So I guess I'll leave you with that. I think I've given you plenty to respond to, and yeah, as always, I enjoy your thoughts. So, and anybody else who is interested in joining in this dialogue, please post a response, and we'll see where it leads us. So, have a good night.